The purpose of this recording in Maya is to simulate the different ways that you can group and parent and combine objects using polygons in Maya, as well as the ability to animate these objects and the effects of changing a pivot point of an object versus a group's pivot point. The first thing I'm going to do is insert a polygonal sphere, and I'm going to move it off to the side. The W key is a shortcut key for the move tool. I'm also going to create myself a poly cube. Now the reason for the polys versus NURBS is in the case of the poly cube, we want all of the sides to be selected at one time. You can see in the outliner it's one solid object, whereas if we were using surfaces or NURBS cube, each of those sides would be an individual piece and you'd always have to go back to the group to select the whole object. With the polys, it's one solid object. The shortcut key for these to turn on the shading is the number 5 key, which is also visible by going to shading and choosing smooth shade all. The 4 key is wireframe, 5 is smooth shade all. I'm going to make both of these objects a little bit larger so that way you can see them a little easier. So I'm going to scale these two objects. Okay? I'm going to move this off to the side. So the first thing I would like to simulate is the ability to rotate the cube. Okay, I've chosen a cube because cubes, you can obviously see the rotation, whereas a sphere, you don't see the rotation as much since it's round in itself. So if you'll notice here with the scale tool, which the shortcut key is the, with the rotate tool, the shortcut key is the E key, I can rotate an object. Okay, so the direction in which I've started my rotation is going to be on the Y. Okay, so I'm going to undo those. So this is the starting point of the placement of my cube. You'll notice in the bottom section down here in the timeline, I'm at frame 1, and my object currently where it's located, I'm happy with. I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. You'll notice that Modify Freeze Transformations over here in the channel box will basically zero out to the placement of this object. This placement of the cube is its new home, therefore its translate positions are all set to 0. I've not yet rotated the cube. I undid those changes, so it was already set to a rotation of 0. And I did scale this cube up substantially at the very beginning, and so this is now the new scale understanding for this cube, which is number 1, or a scale of 1. Okay, so if I would like to set this default position in the timeline, I'm going to press the S key. The S key, S as in Sam, will insert a red line at wherever you are located along the timeline. I happen to be sitting here right at frame 1. I've chosen frame 1. In addition, you'll notice in the channel box, it turns a nice coralish pink color, letting you know that a keyframe has been set. So if I were to play this animation, there won't be any changes. You'll see the timeline will move, but I've not yet given it a second location for it to animate to or from. I'm going to stop the animation. Never let the animation play out as you add in additional keys. So if I would like this cube to do a full 360-degree spin, I likely would like it to happen in less than 1 second. Otherwise that will go really fast. So down here at the very bottom, this is called the stop playback. I'm going to increase this to, let's say, 100 frames. Okay, you'll notice that when it goes to 100 frames, we'll see 100 little ticks, and depending on your overall resolution on your screen, maybe you'll see a count by 5s versus, in my case, it's counting by 2s. Okay, so 24 frames per second is the standard rate of animation, so I'm going to give my object a total of 36 keyframes, so about 1.5 seconds, to do a full rotation. And if you recall, I do remember that the rotate Y is the direction in which we want our cube to rotate to. So the first thing I need to do is put my cursor right at the frame in which I want the keyframe to be set. So I've chosen 36. The second thing I'm going to do is come over to the channel box and type in 360. So that basically gives me 360 degrees of rotation, putting the cube exactly in the same position and location that it was at frame 1. So you should not have seen any change in the placement of this cube. The third thing that I have to do is to press the S key once again. Now again, before I press the S key, I want to reiterate, I have typed in 360 and I press the Enter key that is nearby the semicolon and the quotation marks, and then I press the Enter key. If you have a number pad on your keyboard, if you press the Enter key over on the number pad, this will stay a blinked area, and when you press the S key, you'll simply type in S's and you will not get a new red line on the timeline. Therefore, your keyframe will not officially be set. So something to be aware of. Press the Enter key next to the semicolon and the JKL quotation mark area. All right, so I'll press the S key. A red line has now been inserted at frame 36. Okay, so let's test this out and see what it looks like. You'll notice down here towards the timeline, this number 100, I typed it in. So next to it, there's this little box that if you click and drag on that box, you'll see the timeline is going to scale down. What I've just done is I've left frame 1 as the starting position of my animation playback, and I've changed, by using the scrubber, my end playback is set to 36 frames. To the right is still that number 100. Now that basically means that Maya knows that there are 100 frames in my animation, but I'm only going to play back in the viewport area here up till frame 37. Okay, and as your animation goes on, if you need to add on another 50 frames or 2 frames or 1,000 frames, you can always modify the end timeline or end animation number. Okay, so let's play this out. So you'll see that my cube does a nice little spin. So it's doing a full 360 degrees over about 1.5 seconds, over 36 frames. So I'm going to pause that. To go back to frame 1, you can press this arrow, the double arrow or the double chevron, that if you hover over the tooltip, it'll say go back to the start playback range. This takes me back to the starting point. Now, since I've created this object and I've reset its new position, the object itself still has a center pivot in the center of the cube. Okay, so for example, if I go to my Move tool and I go into wireframe mode, you'll notice in the center of the cube that that's where that Move tool is located. So that is in fact the pivot point for this cube. Okay, I'm going to change that back to number 5. What I would like to do now is change the pivot point. I already have an animation set, so changing the pivot point is going to drastically change my animation. Okay, so how do you change the pivot point? There's 2 different ways of doing this. The first way is to make sure the Move tool is turned on first, and then press the Insert key on your keyboard. And if you have an insert key, it's typically by the home and end above the arrow keys. And in the center of the Move tool, you'll then get this new bullseye or target-looking yellow circle. You can move this around just by left-clicking and dragging and changing the pivot point. If you want it to be exactly on a corner, you're going to press and hold, before you move it, press and hold the V key, and this will snap it to the nearest vertice. And then release your mouse, and then release the V key. And then to end the change of the pivot point, you must once again press the Insert key. The other way of doing this is to press and hold the D key while the Move tool is still turned on. So the Move tool is turned on first, done. Then press and hold the D as in dog key. You'll see that same tool is available, and while holding down the D key, you can also press the V key to then snap it up to a different vertex point. Perfect. Alright, so I'm happy with the new placement in the lower right corner of my cube. This is now my pivot point. I do not need to reanimate my animation. You'll see those 2 red bars are still on the timeline. I'm simply going to play it, and you will see that the cube will now be pivoting around its new pivot point. It's no longer pivoting around the center. That's how you change a pivot point. Perfect. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. Let's move this cube off to the right a little bit, or off to the side I should say, which technically is into the negative Z direction. Based on the front view, this is moving it into the negative Z direction. I'm going to take the circle, and actually for the circle, I really want it to be centered on the grid line, to the 0, 0 quadrant. So rather than eyeballing it, I'm going to come over to my channel box with my P-Sphere 1 selected, and where it says Translate Z, I'm going to type in 0 and press the Enter key, and now it is in the center. Okay? Now, this object itself can have its own animation. So let's watch it do its thing. So at frame 1, we're going to press the S key. And I'm not going to freeze transformation on it like we did with the cube. You'll notice over here it is located at frame 0 or at XYZ of 0. The scales are still increased, but I don't need to zero those out. So again, I'm going to press the S key to set my first keyframe. You should immediately see a red line. If you don't see the red line, ensure that you press the appropriate Enter key when you typed in the value of 0. Now the circle, I don't need to have it move at frame 37. I can have it move at a much later time. So it could go through a spin for a much longer period. I'm going to go all the way to up to 72 frames. Okay, so I'm going to have this sphere spin over 72 frames. And I'm once again going to modify my rotate Y to 360 degrees. That's one full circle. Press the Enter key and press the S key. Now you will also notice that when I got to frame 72, I'm colliding with the cube. Okay, so if you scrub along the bottom, because at frame 1 my cube was located there, it went through a full rotation, and at frame 36 it ended its animation, the cube did, but yet the world or the globe still spins around. Okay, so if we were to play this out, both objects have their own animations, but the cube stops at frame 36 and the sphere continues to rotate on through frame 72. All right. Now, I'm going to take this cube, and though I've given it its own placement at frame 1, I'm going to move it off to the side. I don't like it colliding over there. Now, just because I moved it and just because there's already a red line here does not mean it will automatically update. So, I've not rekeyed it at this point. All I've done is moved this cube off to the side. It now has a location of translate Z -10, but watch when I play this. It snaps right back to where it came from, and it will continue to stay there. At no point does it go off to that location that I moved it to. And that is because I need to always rekey any movements. So again, I'm back at frame 1. I'm going to take this cube, move it off to the side, and now I have to press the S key at frame 1. So guess what? At frame 36, where is it going to be? It's going to move right back over. Let me demonstrate. Let's go back to frame 1 and play. And you see how it's shifting over? Starts over in the far right and shifts over to the left. All right, so if you are happy with the cube being located where it was located on the far right at -10 on the translate Z, guess what you have to do at frame 36? You got to do the same thing again. So with my cube selected, a shortcut is to middle mouse click at frame 36. See how the cube didn't move? So basically it's saying, oh, at frame 36 you want to use the same values, and I don't want to use the exact same values because if you recall, we rotated it on the y-axis 360. So at frame 36 this should say 360. So what I'm going to do is go to just to the translate X, select it, so the name is selected, not the value, right click and hold, and go down to key selected. Okay, now you're not going to see a visual change. That red line was already there, so you won't see a bigger red line. Down here in the lower section where the status bar is located, you should see something that says result : and typically it's a 1. That basically means that we believe, according to Maya standards, what you're attempting to do has been completed. I've now rewound to frame 1. Now, the expectation is that this cube will not move back towards the sphere. It will simply spin on its pivotal point in the lower right corner. And in the meantime, the world is spinning. All right, getting closer to where we want it to be. The next thing we're going to do is go through what's called a grouping or a parent and childing. Two different things. The first thing is to let's do a parent-child relationship. Okay, so let's say the parent is this sphere in the middle and the child is the cube. When you have a parent-child relationship, it means the child can do whatever it is animated or coded to do, but yet when the parent says let's go, it's coming with the parent. All the while it's still doing and completing the animation you set for the child. Think about it in a real-world scenario. A child wants to have a temper tantrum. Go for it, have a temper tantrum. But when the parent says let's go into the car, they both go to the car and the child still has his temper tantrum. All right, so how do you create a parent-child relationship? There's two different ways. First off, you select all of the children. Yes, you can have multiple children. Okay, in this case, we only have one child, and that's going to be our cube. And then you shift select the parents. Okay, so for every time you're going to do a parent-child relationship, it's select all of the children first and then shift select the parent. Therefore, all of the children will have a white wireframe, and the last thing that you select always has a green wireframe, so your parent will always have a visual of a green wireframe. The next thing is how to parent. You can press the P key, as in parent, on your keyboard. You can go to Edit and choose Parent. You'll notice just below there is the unparent, so anything that you do parent, you can always unparent. And there we go. So now I'm going to click off because I don't want anything selected. If you click on your cube, the cube is still selected, or is selected. No big deal. The parent's not because it's the child. Click off, and now click on just the parent. You'll notice you click on the parent, both the parent and the child are both selected. And both of them have green wireframes. So if you do any kind of shifting of the parent, the child comes with it. All right, now watch this animation take place. Okay. All right, so let's see what's happening in this whole grand scheme of things. It seems as though this cube has gotten ginormous. Well, now why did it get so big? And at what point does it get small again, or does it ever get small again? And the deal is that the sphere, which we did not zero out, it has a scale of 3.494. The child, being just the cube, has a scale of 1. Well, because whatever we apply to this sphere, at this point, because we're animating them, it then takes on these same properties. So, let me play it again as I zoomed out a little bit. I rewound to frame 1. I'm going to play it. The cube is spinning around the sphere because the sphere is the parent, and the parent takes the child wherever it goes. The distance has not been adjusted because at frame 1, that is their distance between the two. The cube, meaning the child, still is going to animate on its own pivot point in the lower right corner. And then it also will spin around the globe, or the sphere, because again, the parent drags with it all of its children. All right? So that's a parent-child relationship. So how do you get rid of this from being a parent-child relationship? You can do this 2 different ways. One is to select your P cube from your outliner, and with it selected, you click and drag it down, and it unparents itself, okay? So now the 2 of them are separate objects. Here's the sphere, here's the cube. When one is selected, the other is not highlighted, and vice versa, okay? The other thing you can do, I'm going to undo my changes, is to take your parent and then go to Edit and go to Unparent. Oops. Select your child and go to Edit, Unparent. And now that they are separate objects. So select the children or the child, and it's its own, and then select the parent, and it is its own object. Now as I go back to animating this, because they're no longer in a parent-child relationship, the cube goes right back to the way it was. We're going to watch it animate, and you're going to watch the sphere go through its animation of sorts. Okay? All right, so the next thing we're going to do is group. Okay, so let's select these 2 objects, which are uniquely their own objects. Okay, move this a little bit forward. Oops. And let's select 2 different objects, or create 2 different objects, and we're going to group them. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of these 2 animations, these 2 objects, they're gone. Okay, so nothing is on the stage, and you can see there's no red lines. So we're going to select 2 different objects. So here's what we call a torus. I'll make this a little bit bigger, move it off to the side a little bit. We'll go this way to this side. And I'm going to freeze transformation it so it zeroes it out in the channel box. And then I'm going to create myself a cylinder and move it off to the side. Scale it, modify, freeze transformations, and then I'm going to create myself a sphere, and I'm going to scale it and make it in the middle, and I will also freeze transformation this. Modify, freeze transformations. Okay, so I've got 3 separate objects on the stage. Let me move this one a little bit closer and modify, freeze transformation. Okay, so each one, if you look in the channel box, uniquely in their own position with their own unique scaling, they're all zeroed out and scales are all set to 1. Okay, so there's no animation right now currently set on these objects, so there's no reason to play this out. So if I were to select all three of these objects, so the last one selected has a green wireframe, I can go to Modify or Edit and then go down to Group, Edit Group, or Control G. Okay, so now when I click off, nothing is selected. When I click on the cylinder, it is its own, the sphere is its own, and the torus is its own. However, in the channel box, if you shift click on your group that's been created there, you will see that the three separate objects are located here. Okay, so what we just did was basically put them into one big group. Well, how do you access the group? There's two different ways. If your outliner's opened, you can always click on Group 1. Let's rename this. I'm going to double click this and call this let's see, Shape Group. G-R-O-U-P. All right, so now this is called Shape Group. Okay, so again, I can click on Shape Group and all three things get selected. If I go to adjust or make adjustments to these objects, they all come with me. If I individually select a cylinder, it will have its own placement. We'll move this down and move this one up, etc. Again, if I go back to Shapes Group, they all hold their exact position as expected. Okay, so now I'm going to undo a few things, put these back where they were. If I want to get access to the group and I don't have the outliner open, so I've just got the stage area. I'm working hard on just the stage area. So how do I get access to the group? Well, you'll notice in the channel box, P-Sphere 1 is selected. If you press the up arrow key on your keyboard, I'm now in Shape Group. Okay, so now we're in good shape. Ba-dum-ba-dum-bum. All right, so what this means in terms of animation. Each object can have its own animation. So I'm going to go to frame 1 on the torus, press the S key, and then let's go to 36. Let's give us a quick rotation. We're going to go negative 360 and press the S key on that one. The sphere, let's go with frame 1. We'll key it with the S key, and at frame 36 to be consistent, we're just going to scale this little guy. We'll make him bigger. Press the S key. And the cylinder, let's go to frame 1. Oops, did I not record that? Oh, I did. Okay. Then we're going to go to cylinder at frame 1, press the S key, and then let's say at frame 36 to be consistent. We will also give this a slight rotation. We'll go to positive 360, so it'll go the other way. All right. And then press the S key. Red line appears. So let's watch this have its way out. I'm going to go all the way down to frame 37 there. And you'll see that there's no red line showing up in your timeline. It's because none of your objects are selected. Okay. I think I forgot to, oh, there it is. There it is. And there it is. Okay, there's 36. Okay, so let's play this out. All right, so we're seeing these three objects move around. Okay, so now let's go back to frame 1. Let's say we want all of them to move and do the exact same thing. We want them to basically spin around or move up and down at the same time. Okay, so rather than me individually taking the cylinder, moving it up at frame 1, coming to frame 36 and moving it down, moving it up, frame 36, move it down, I can now animate the whole group. Okay, so I've got the cylinder selected. I'll press the up arrow key. This gets me into Shape Group. Shape Group has no animation set so far. It also has a pivot point in the center, not because it's the sphere, but simply that is just the center of the three objects that are selected. Okay. So at frame 1, let's press the S key. Well, actually, let's do this at, let's do frame 10. Okay, at frame 10, let's press the S key, which means that the group isn't doing anything for the first 9 frames. And at frame 10, we're going to have its new holding place. And let's hop to frame 15. Let's have it shoot straight on up on the group. Press the S key. And at frame 20, we're going to zero it back out and press the S key. So now you're going to see an overall animation with all three objects doing their individual thing over 36 frames, but then at 10, 15, and 20, it's going to go with this little bounce in the middle of it. So let's rewind and play. Okay, so that's the differences between a group and a parent-child relationship when animating objects. Every object can have its own timeline. Every object can have its own animation, and it also can be animated based on being a child of a parent, as well as animated because it is a part of a group. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.